Okay, this is a video I made Thanksgiving morning after I dropped Lynn off at her parents' house for Thanksgiving, and before I went to my mom's house for Thanksgiving to dinner. I'm just now doing the voiceover on this on Friday morning because I didn't have time to do it yesterday because I was doing so much running around. This video was done at Belle Isle Park in Detroit. I just saw a few birds gathered over. I figured I'd fly the drone over and, get them to take off so I can get some footage of them flying off. I wanted to try to keep up with them, but it was hard to select one particular bird to follow. So as they scattered, I just tried to keep, the flock in frame as much as I could. Birds are really hard to follow when they're in flight. A drone doesn't stand a chance to keep up with them unless they wanted to. But anyway, as you can see, it was a cold, dreary, cloudy day, and it was raining, lightly raining, but the drone had no problem gaining altitude and flying through it, which is a good testimony to how good the Mavic Air 2 is. But anyway, it was a good flight. As I fly over, I'm looking down at everything on Belle Isle. My truck is parked over on the road. It's funny how I tried to find a secluded spot where nobody was around, and when I parked, it was secluded. Nobody was there. But people won't let you be alone. They see you, they like, oh, there's a spot right there. There's somebody parked there. I'm going to go right beside them. People are just programmed to be together. They don't want to see you alone, enjoying your solitude. They want to be near you for some reason. I guess it's some kind of a conditioning that people have. And they can't help it. So you can't fault them for that. But anyway, I got some pretty good footage. Even though it wasn't sunny out, you can still see the ground features and the trees. Not much color left because of the cool weather we've been getting. A lot of the leaves have already fallen off the trees, so they're pretty bare. But it was still nice. Usually I'm a little sleepy. I'm taking a day off, and I figured I'd do this while laying in bed. So I hope you guys enjoy it. But anyway, that's the main road that comes into the park, and I'm parked over at the other end, way down there. There's one car right there on the far right side. I passed by that as I was coming in, and so I drove on down to find a spot that was secluded where only I was going to be there, because I didn't want people looking in my windows or looking at my truck or getting suspicious and checking me out. And I hope I'd be, secluded, but that didn't happen because people are curious. They want to see what you're up to, what you're doing. So anyway, I parked and I took the drone up to get these pictures and these videos, and it turned out pretty good. Turned out really good. Anyway, like I said, this was Thanksgiving morning. I'm thinking it was probably around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. The thing is, a year ago, almost to this very day, I was in the hospital because I suffered a stroke. I woke up that morning and I didn't have the numbness or the slurred speech or anything else they describe, as symptoms of having a stroke. I was simply really weak on the left side. My left arm and my left leg were just really weak. That was the only thing that let me know that something was wrong. And, of course, I'm weak on my left side anyway because I'm right-handed. So, even still, I knew something was wrong. So I got up, went to use the bathroom, took a shower, and I still was weak on that side. And I just thought it was just, how you sleep sometimes on the wrong way and the blood flow isn't flowing. So you feel weak on that side or something like that and everything. But I'm pretty in tune to my body. I still was like, something's wrong. I'm not the kind of person that goes to the hospital or doctors at the drop of a hat. If I decide I'm going to a doctor, it's because, something is seriously wrong. I'm not feeling right at all. It really has to be a big deal for me to go to a doctor. But anyway, I came out of the room and I told Lynn, I'm like, Lynn, I don't feel right. My left side is real weak, everything. Of course, she's like, well, I hope you feel better. Whatever. It didn't alarm her. So, but annoyance to me, she went back into the room and got on the internet and Googled it, and was like, came back a few minutes later, Cleve, you having a stroke, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, look at me, says, let me talk to you. I'm like, and she noticed there wasn't any slurred speech or any drooping of the face or anything like that. Like I said, there was no symptoms other than the fact that I was just, weak on one side, But when she said stroke and whatever, I'm like, that scared me. I'm like, you know what? You don't have much time to mess around if you got a stroke or whatever. The sooner you get to the doctor and get help, the better off you'll be. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna play with this. Let's go to the doctor, the hospital and see, let them check me out. Better safe than sorry. So we get in the car, and I was gonna drive myself, but somehow my equilibrium was off. I couldn't drive straight whenever I drifted more to the left of the road, whatever, and it scared her and it scared me too, because I don't want to have a darn head-on collision. Because if you drift to the left when you're on a two-lane road, which is most of the roads around where I live, the cars are on one side, and you're on the right side, and the other cars on the left side coming from the opposite direction. So you have to make sure that you stay on your side of the road, or you're gonna have a bad day. So she made such a fuss, and when I pulled over, I said, okay, I'm gonna let you drive. So I let her drive, which is something I never hardly do. And she rarely wants to do, because she rather, me drive, because I would see all her bad driving habits, and then I would critique her on them, and she doesn't like that. So she was, raring and willing to go driving. So I knew it was bad at that point, whatever, So anyway, we get to the hospital, and they take my blood pressure and everything. They told her she had to leave because, it was right at the beginning of the COVID thing that was going on last year. And so she wasn't allowed to stay, so she had to leave and go home. And they admitted me and took me upstairs to a room, but not right away. They put me in the hall for a while first. And unbeknownst to me, when you're having a stroke, they don't want to feed you because you could choke and suffocate. If you have a stroke and your ability to swallow is impaired, but they didn't tell me that. They would have explained that to me. I would have been like, okay, I see why they're not giving me anything to eat, but they didn't do that. They treated me like a child and just kept telling me, well, we'll give you something later or whatever. We have to talk to your doctor before we give you something, blah, 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 blah. Instead of just treat me like an adult and telling me, listen, we don't want to feed you anything because we're afraid that you might choke or this, that, other. That I could have handled. But being lied to or procrastinated, to you know, that just didn't work, you know. So anyway, I sat there waiting and waiting. If they finally get me a room, I asked for something to eat again, you know. And they're like, well, we have to talk to the doctor. Let them know they kept, you know, stalling instead of just telling me, you know. So anyway, I'm like, I'm in the hospital. I finally get a room. And these people ain't feeding me nothing, you know. They would give me water, but they wouldn't give me nothing to eat. And I'm starving, you know. And it's Thanksgiving, you know. Thanksgiving, you know, that's what I do. I eat on Thanksgiving, you know. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, these people are not feeding me on Thanksgiving. And I'm feeling okay, you know. The weakness in my side still there, but I mean, I can still function. It wasn't like I couldn't get up or I couldn't move. So anyway, I'm like, I'm gonna ask the people for food one more time. If they put me off again, I'm out of here. And of course, they blew me off again and told me, okay, kept, you know, putting it off. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to get me something to eat. These people ain't gonna feed me. I'm out of here. So I walked out of the hospital and take off, going home, walking after a stroke, you know. And it was confirmed it was a stroke because they did do an MRI on me and they did a CAT scan. And there was a spot in my brain that was a dark spot where there was a clot there, and it was damaged, you know. And so I could have had another stroke or fell out or something out there walking up the street trying to go home, all because they wouldn't give me all the information, you know. But I'm like, I'm going to give me something to eat. So I ended up walking, and then I called her. She came and got me and took me home, and I ate, you know, got me something to eat and chilled and relaxed. And then you know, she had got on the phone and called my family members and told them that this fool done walked away from the hospital after having a stroke, you know. And everybody was saying, like, you need to go back to the hospital because this is nothing to play with, blah, 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 blah. And anyway, I talked to different people and they said I should go back over, but I didn't listen to anybody until I talked to Linda's sister, Gwen, and she convinced me to go back to the hospital. She was the only one that spoke to me like an adult and appealed to my sensibility. Instead of just telling me what to do, she told me, you know, what I, you know, should do, you know. And so I'm like, you know what, she's right. You know, somehow she got through to me, and I went on ahead and said, okay, I'm going to the hospital. I went back, swallowed my pride, went back into the hospital, and they readmitted me, and they checked me out, kept me there for another couple of days, explained to me why they couldn't feed me, blah, blah, blah. But at that point, I was full. I got me something to eat, and I was okay. And I'm like, well, why didn't you just tell me in the first place that, whatever? You know, if you just would have told me that, it wouldn't have been a problem. I could have waited. Well, it wasn't like I was starving. I just wanted to eat because eating is what I do, you know. And probably what got me end up in a stroke in the first place because of the bad things I eat. But anyway, long story short, turned out where I was okay. And the day I got out of the hospital, I got home. The first thing I did was went to the park. Before we even went home, on the way home, we stopped at the park. I said, I want to go for a walk because walking is what I do, you know. So Linda and I went to the park against her objections, and we went walking. And it was a nice day. The sun was shining, and it was nice. I got me a little walk and everything. And people don't understand. They're like, why would you go walking right after getting out of the hospital from having a stroke? You could have another stroke, you could have died, you could have this, you could have that, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, listen, I had a stroke. And the reason why I had that stroke and it didn't kill me or it didn't do more damage to me than it did is because just about every day, all I do is walk. I love walking. And I'm like, that's what kept me to this point as it is, you know. The fact that I'm walking, the contributing factors of me having that stroke was having a bad diet, eating bad things, stuff I shouldn't have been eating, and lack of exercise. Of course I walk, but because of the COVID, they shut the gyms down, so I couldn't go to the gym and do my Zumba and get my cardio going and everything, whatever. And so my health deteriorated, and that's why I ended up having a stroke. I gained weight, and I'm still eating the bad things and everything, whatever. But anyway, I got my walk in, and as you can see, the picture on the screen here is starting to fade out. It's because I took the drone up higher. I'm now into the fog bank, and like I said, it was a cloudy day. My intention was to try to rise up above the clouds so that I could see the sun. But sometimes clouds or a fog bank can be 5-10 feet thick, and other times it could be 100 feet thick. So my drone went up as high as it could, but as it went higher and higher, it got thicker and thicker to the point where I couldn't see anything, couldn't see the ground, and I turned the camera upwards and I couldn't see the sun either. So at that point, I stayed there for a little while, hoping maybe I'd fly out of it, and I decided, no, I might as well go on back down and get back under it again and try and find my way back to where I'm parked. So that's what I did. But anyway, after I finished my walk, I went on back home and called Gwen and thanked her for convincing me to go back to the hospital, which was the best thing I could have done. But nothing happened bad. But they were able to check me out, keep me under observation, so that nothing bad did happen, and everything worked out good. So today now, I've lost weight. I've been eating better. I've gotten more exercise. I still do my walking. I take Cole, which is my dog I got from the animal shelter last year. Just after the stroke, I figured that wasn't going to stop me from my plans of having an endless summer. I was going to go back to Florida like I did the year before and enjoy the winter in the sunshine of Florida. And since I have a marketable skill, I could go back down there and get a job, no problem. So anyway, I'm coming down out of the clouds now. So I went down to Florida and stayed down there for a few weeks, working and everything, whatever. But then I had an accident. My car was totaled. So without transportation, renting a car would be way too expensive to be able to rent a car and stay down in Florida. So I had to come back. I ended up having to buy a moving truck in order to get back, and that's what I did. And the day that I rented the moving truck, I remembered that while I was in Florida working, the job I was working on through a temporary service, we parked our cars at the police station, and the police station is pretty much attached to an animal shelter down there. And the animal shelter is where they keep the animals that people don't want or that turn in or whatever, or the injured animals or whatever. And there one day I happened to go there, and after noticing that place, during the course of working and getting off work and getting in the car and leaving, I had one day I came to work or whatever, and the schedule had changed, so we wasn't able to work that day. And I'm like, wow, I'm gonna kill some time by going to the animal shelter and looking at some, the animals. I was gonna look at the dogs and the cats and everything. I had no intention of getting a dog or a cat or anything else for that matter. It was just like a trip to the zoo. You go to the zoo, you don't go to get a lion or a tiger or a bear, you go there to look at the lions and tigers and bears, and then leave the lions and tigers and bears there where they belong. But I ended up going there and looking at the animals and everything, whatever, and I was looking at the dogs and everything, and I'm like, this dog is too big for me to get anyway, because where I live, they only allow dogs and animals that are below a certain weight, and certain breeds they don't allow. And I looked at a few dogs that were clearly pit bulls and huge German shepherds and other dogs, because those are the kinds that people don't adopt because they're scared of them. So I'm looking. I seen a few cats. I played with the cats and everything, because I like cats or whatever, But I wasn't gonna, get a cat because I got free cats around my house that I feed all the time or whatever. And they. Why would I get one when I got plenty of them hanging around my house all the time? I don't consider them pets. I just feed them and whatever, and they come around and they go, and I don't have any responsibility for them and everything, whatever. And so I happen to see the dogs. I'm walking through and I see Cole, and he tried to get me through the cage. I'm like, I'm looking at him or whatever, and I didn't realize that the animal control lady was watching me as I was looking at the animals and everything. I happened to be recording it with my phone, and she noticed, I'm looking at Cole or whatever, and he's barking at me through the cage and everything. And I'm like, wow, look at this guy. And she steps up, she says, he's really a nice dog or whatever. He's really not, that vicious. I'm like, okay. I said he'd be a good watchdog or whatever, because, he scared me. I wasn't about to come in that cage. And she walks right up to it and sticks her finger in there, and Cole calms down and he licks her finger, and she says, oh, he's a nice dog. Would you like to pet him or, play with him? I'm like, no, this dog wants to eat my face off. I think I'll leave him where he is. And before I knew it, she opened the door and brought him out. And I'm like, okay. And she puts a leash on him and everything. He allows her to do it because he's used to that. So we take him out to this area where they let you play with the dogs and everything. And, get acquainted with them before you buy them or or adopt them, they call it. So I'm like, okay, I played with him a little bit, whatever. We kind of hit it off pretty good, whatever. I'm like, man, this is a nice little dog, whatever, And he looked like he was under the 40-pound limit that they allow me to keep him where I live. And he was unique. That's what caught my attention, because he had the gray color. And at the time, I never realized that the significance that gray would play in my situation. At the time, my drones are gray, Cole is gray, and later on I ended up buying a gray truck. The coincidence just piled up and piled up because of that color. And it wasn't by, any design of mine or whatever, so I don't know. It just worked out that way. Maybe you could say it was God's will. Sometimes God will do things like that to let you see that it was Him through the connections, and you don't realize it at the time, and then afterwards it finally dawns on you, wait a minute, I got gray drones, I got a gray dog, and I got a gray truck. And all three of these things, match up. And through the randomness of life, they shouldn't match up, but they did. And anyway, I took Cole back and put him back in the kettle and everything. I'm like, no, I'm not really ready to get a dog now. This is not what I want to do or whatever, but I really wanted him. But I'm like, let me sleep on it, whatever. But I had no intention of actually coming back and getting him or whatever. But when I wrecked my car and ended up going back to I ended up going to rent the moving truck or whatever to come back to Michigan with, because I couldn't afford to stay in Florida, renting cars, because it had become spring break time at that point anyway. That's him barking now. But anyway, I went on ahead and said, I'm going to go back and get him if he's still there. This was like a couple of weeks later. And I went back, and sure enough, he was there. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get Cole, So they drew up the paperwork and everything, whatever. And I paid the little $40 and I adopted him. And he was glad to see me. He somehow, I think he remembered me. And I brought him home. I brought him to the outside to the truck. We got in the truck. And we drove to the hotel, which I was staying in at the time. And went ahead and adopted him, and then I went ahead and took the moving truck, and I drove home from Florida to Michigan in that truck. And I brought Cole with me. I had all my camping equipment that I had a tent and everything, but I didn't need a tent because I had the moving truck. Whatever, I put my little cot in there and all my camping equipment in there, and we drove back to Michigan in that moving van, and that was that. We ended up coming back home, and I converted the shed into a doghouse for him, and he loved it. You know, we still go to the park every day. It's just about every day. I'm not saying every single day, but I take him for a walk at the park, and not just a walk around the park where I live. We actually get in the car and drive to a park and go walking. And this day at Belle Isle was one of those days that we went to the park. And I'm flying the drone in back to the truck now. I'm coming right up to the truck. I'm gonna land the truck right on the tailgate. I left it open. And Cole, I ended up getting him and putting him back in the truck. He's inside with me now. And I'm just gonna land right on the back of the tailgate of the truck. And that's the end of this video. That's how I spent my Thanksgiving this year, which is a lot better than last year. But just thought I'd make this. And that has been my year. Hopefully this year will be a lot better when I go down to Florida again, because now I have a truck to camp in. And I have my camping gear and my slide out thing and everything. It's going to be a lot easier to camp inside of a pickup truck than it was inside of a Cadillac. And I'll still take my tents with me, but vehicle wise, I'm in a lot better shape. I just turned the lights on so I can use this as a guide to guide my drone in safely into the back of the truck. And here I come. I'm bringing it in. I'm being really careful because if I come in too fast, I'll rear end the truck, destroying the drone. And if I come in too low, I'm gonna hit the bottom of the tailgate. So this is really fine flying right here. And it happens to be my first attempt at doing this. But I think I nailed it. Anyway, coming in nice and slow. I don't want to go up inside. I just want to sit around the tailgate. Lights just went out. I'm turning the camera down so that I can bring it down right on the tailgate so I can see where I'm landing. If I would have tried to land here, I would have landed on the ground. I don't want to land on the ground. I want to land on the tailgate. So I'm moving forward to the tailgate. The drone automatically went up because of the sensor. So I'm positioning it right over top of the tailgate. And I'm bringing it down. And I'm coming down now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.